You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going.
The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
Tonight on Eye on America, how extreme wealth is driving out essential workers from this iconic mountain town.
The billionaires are buying out the millionaires.
Then an investigation finds Texas is sending millions to anti-abortion groups with little accountability. On the CBS.
They're not even in the same book.
Still believe Democrats can win in November.
I believe Democrats will win up and down the ballot. Joe Biden will be reelected, and we're going to take the House.
An attack on one is an attack on all. The strongest possible deterrent to aggression, the best way to prevent war from happening in the first place, is exactly through that commitment.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. President Biden is addressing world leaders in Washington. His remarks come at a high-stakes NATO summit, and it's getting underway right now. The meeting is expected to largely focus on Russia, the war in Ukraine, and Western countries' responses to that. The president working now on two fronts as he tries to unite the alliance and his party behind his own re-election bid. Sam Vinograd and Ed O'Keefe join us now. Sam is a CBS News national security contributor. Ed is CBS News' senior White House correspondent. Ed, we'll begin with you. You're outside the White House. What's the president's message at NATO as he faces all of this political discussion at home?
Yeah, the world stage coming to Washington and to the president's front yard, Bob. The president expected tonight to herald the fact that this alliance, which was established by the signing of some paperwork in the exact room where he'll speak 75 years ago, remains the strongest military alliance in the world and one that has expanded despite the Ukraine conflict, something that the president continues to talk about quite frequently as he makes the case to voters that he should be reelected, that he expanded and fortified what is seen as the most important military alliance in the world. This will be the first meeting at which Finland and Sweden are full members, but much of the conversation around this summit will be that big white country there on the map that isn't quite filled in gray or blue, and that is Ukraine, of course, which remains at war with Russia nearby. We're expecting a series of announcements in the coming hours regarding a series of measures to boost Ukraine's capabilities as the war continues. And you're going to see over the course of the next few days the president meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine, the new British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. There's going to be appearances by several Indo-Pacific and some Asian countries that are now working in partnership with NATO in various ways, all of it designed to show the world and to show skeptical Americans, most of all, that the president is someone who still has the power to convene at least the Western world or democratic countries together to fight aggression from Russia, from China, and other threats.
Ed, thank you for that illuminating look at everything the president is facing. World leaders, though, are also looking at Vladimir Putin, Sam, and they see he is making his own alliances. India, Hungarian's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a recent meeting in Moscow. What's your assessment of how the Russians are handling this moment for NATO?
Well, while President Biden has been focused on building out the NATO alliance, 2 additional countries have joined during his presidency. We now have 23 member states reaching their commitment to spend 2% of GDP on national defense. That is viewed as a success for the Biden administration. While the U.S. has been bolstering our alliances, Putin has not been sitting on the sidelines. He has been equally as focused on establishing himself as not a pariah on the international stage, but as a country with friends. And that is why we saw Putin invite Prime Minister Modi of India to Russia. India and the Soviet Union were quite close during the Cold War. India is now the second largest buyer of Russian oil, despite U.S. sanctions. And that visit was ill-timed. It is occurring on the margins of the NATO summit. At the same time, Hungary, a NATO member since 1999, is notably close with Vladimir Putin. So Vladimir Putin is bolstering his own relationships, his own alliances, while Biden is trying to show a stronger and more united NATO.
Ed, are you still with us?
Yep.
Ed, what's the latest on the questions facing the White House and President Biden about his health?
Well, it was notable. The press secretary today said the White House is eager to turn the page and continue doing the job. But up the street outside the Capitol, it was Democrats coming out of a big meeting they had together, House Democrats, where one, Steve Cohen of Tennessee, suggested we're not even on the same page. We're not even in the same book in regards to how exactly House Democrats believe the president and the party should proceed going into November. We've now seen another vulnerable House Democrat tonight, Mickey Sherrill of northern New Jersey, somebody who's seen to have statewide ambitions in the Garden State in the future, come out and suggest that she wants the president to step aside as well. She says, the president cares deeply about the future of the country, but she's asking him to declare that he won't run for re-election for reasons similar to the reasons raised by other so-called frontliners or the most vulnerable of House Democrats in districts and in states where things are going to get awfully purple this fall. But here at the White House, they yet again today faced questions about it, saying the president continues to talk to lawmakers. He's having a meeting tonight virtually with big city Democratic mayors, including the leaders of New York and Chicago, to continue the outreach he did to governors last week and others in recent days. And as for questions about his health, overnight they issued this letter clarifying that this military and medical expert on neurology had been here 8 times in the last year, not to see the president, not in regards to his health, but as part of regular meetings with the White House physician and other medical professionals who work here on the White House campus, where thousands of members of the military and civilians, of course, are also treated. So that clarification was given. And they continue to have to weather the concerns raised by Democrats across the country. The president will be most concerned about those like Congresswoman Sherrill from New Jersey raising concerns, and yet understands why they might have to put some public distance between them and him. But if that continues to trickle out, and if things don't go well with this summit in the coming days, they anticipate the calls will intensify, even though he continues to say, and your reporting, my reporting, everybody else's reporting here at CBS bears this out, that he's got no plans to get out.
Sam, what do world leaders make of all this? I sat down with the Secretary General of NATO on Sunday when he was on Face the Nation, and he kind of dodged the question a little bit. He said he's focused on NATO, focused on the summit. Is there private concern just about President Biden's standing among some world leaders or not? I mean, or maybe the question, too, is, since you're so well-sourced and have great connections in the national security community, are national security experts concerned that all of this political talk could have an impact on his ability to have capital and stature at the NATO summit?
Well, certainly my sources do indicate that globally we are seeing scenario planning by our allies and our adversaries alike under 2 scenarios. One, President Biden continuing and being viewed in a diminished capacity, whether rightfully or wrongfully, on the world stage, what that means for U.S. leadership globally, or President Trump being elected and really retrenching from our historical system of alliances that was built after World War II. So there is certainly scenario planning underway by our allies and adversaries, which is just prudent. But, Bob, I've been to NATO summits. I've staffed several of them. And it's worth noting that there's an official agenda for these summits, and then there's an unofficial agenda.
What's the unofficial one for this one?
The unofficial agenda for the both the sitting U.S. president and for his re-election campaign is reassurance on 2 fronts. Reassuring our allies that the U.S. is committed to not just the NATO alliance as it stands, but building the NATO alliance going forward, including by welcoming Ukraine into that alliance. And the reassurance agenda is equally as focused on reassuring our allies and the world that is watching that the president is up to the task. So it is that dual reassurance agenda, while unofficial, that is top of mind for the president and his team.
Sam Vinograd and Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it. Meanwhile, former Oklahoma Republican Senator Jim Inhofe has died. Inhofe's family says the Republican had a stroke over July 4th in that holiday and passed away Tuesday morning. Inhofe served in the Senate from 1994 until 2023. Covered him for many years myself. And for several years, he was the chair of the Armed Services Committee. He gained a lot of attention for doubting that climate change was caused in any way by human activity, calling the theory, quote, the greatest hoax ever perpetuated on the American people. Senator Inhofe was a conservative, well-liked by his colleagues, 89 years old. House and Senate Democrats are holding closed-door meetings this week, a lot of them in Washington, to address how President Biden should proceed on his re-election bid. Our Scott McFarland is on Capitol Hill. He'll join us next with more on where things stand. You're streaming America Decides.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
What a scene on Capitol Hill in the past few days. House Democratic leaders say they are having, quote, constructive discussions, you hear that phrase a lot, about President Biden and his candidacy, where things stand. But some members of Congress, or the Democrats, are not fully committing to backing him at this point. In response to whether House Democrats came to a consensus today, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said, quote, conversations are ongoing. While House Democratic Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar said they support President Biden as long as he is the presumptive nominee, he underscored that their focus is on winning in November.
Our caucus meeting today was about listening to members. There was no instruction to get on the same page. We were talking about the importance, the twin goals that we have, preventing Donald Trump from ever setting foot in the White House and getting 218 votes for Hakeem Jeffries on January 3rd.
Scott McFarland joins us now from Capitol Hill. It's been a busy day, Scott, for you. A lot of lawmakers to chase, to ask questions to. Let's listen, though, to New York Democrat Jerry Nadler, what he had to say.
On the call Sunday, did you call on him to step aside? What changed for you?
I'm not going to comment on what I said in a private meeting. All I'll say is the president made very clear yesterday that he's running, and for me that's dispositive. We have to support him.
Do you have concerns about him being on the top of the ticket?
Whether I have concerns or not, is beside the point. He's going to be our nominee, and we all have to support him.
Scott, let me read that back to you again. Quote, whether I have concerns or not is beside the point. He's going to be our nominee. We all have to support him. Is the Nadler POV, that point of view, the point of view of most Democrats right now? Or is there some faction that has much more enthusiasm for President Biden and another faction that maybe is even more negative publicly and privately? How do you read it all?
Well, I think the largest faction, Bob, is the undeclared group that hasn't announced or answered questions about where they stand on whether the president should withdraw. I can tell you this for sure. Over the past 24 hours, the president has largely treaded water with political support among elected Democrats in Congress. He got one back in Jerry Nadler, who at one point said the president should withdraw. Then today mustered some support, but late this afternoon he lost one. Mikey Sherrill, the Democrat from New Jersey, who flipped a red seat from blue in those 2018 midterms, issued a lengthy statement championing President Biden's accomplishments, but concluding the statement by saying he should step aside from this race to help preserve the White House and prevent a Trump presidency again. Listen, look at that quote there, Bob. I know President Biden cares deeply about the future of our country. That's why I'm asking that he declare that he won't run for re-election. In the Senate, Bob, pretty much everybody who's not a top vocal Biden surrogate kept their powder dry again today. Didn't join those 7 to 9 House Democrats who specifically said the president should withdraw. But we questioned 2 senators in particular who had some compelling things to say. One of his best surrogates, Chris Coons of Delaware, and one of the most powerful Senate Democrats of all, Dick Durbin of Illinois. Listen to the contrasts in their responses.
At this point, I would say to the president, the challenge is to you. Show us in the way you campaign that you can effectively beat Donald Trump. Show us that you're a good candidate, and I believe he is, and that what we saw in that debate night is not typical of what we're going to see in the future.
Many of my colleagues have concern. But what the president has done is listened to those concerns, acted on them, and sent all of us a letter. He's in, he's running, he will be our nominee, he will be our next president.
So let me give you the basic summary here, Bob. The House is disjointed, not speaking with one voice, and really all over the place on this issue. The Senate has preserved its ability largely to try to synchronize, to try to unify. If they're going to push one direction or the other, most of them have kept a bit of equivocation in their words and in their voices and can still try to muster a unified effort.
But Scott, great reporting, but I'm not hearing anybody who's really willing to push President Biden off. Sending a gentle letter is one thing, as the Congresswoman from New Jersey did, but that's not a political war against the incumbent. Is anybody preparing to actually, one, run against President Biden, as he's called any challenger to do? He said, take me on at the convention. Or 2, just come out and say, it's over. He has to step aside. Or is it, do you sense in your reporting a little bit of a receding in that sentiment?
See, I don't think it's that. I don't think there's been ground gained by the president over the past 24 hours. What I'm sensing in the Senate in particular is people are deferring this or hitting a snooze button on what to say about the president. Should he withdraw? They're giving him, and to a degree themselves, more time, more opportunities for the president to speak, and as so many of them have said, show himself, prove himself, demonstrate something to the voters, demonstrate something to elected officials that really does point everybody in the direction of Thursday, doesn't it, Bob, when he has that press conference?
Over the weekend, headline after headline, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia is preparing to huddle with colleagues to discuss the future of the Democratic ticket. We kept hearing about Senator Warner. It was all over every single political publication, political news show. Then suddenly Senator Warner decides to not have this meeting. Where is he today on the Biden question? And who, if anyone, among Senate Democrats is the kind of point person for the Biden concerned coalition?
It's another broad group, I think, in the U.S. Senate. Most Senate Democrats, Bob, have given us a relatively uniform response of we have concerns, we have questions, we need more time. They walked out of their Tuesday Senate Democrat luncheon with what appeared to be a company line of it was a constructive meeting, we have nothing to declare, nothing to announce. It seems clear that they have tried to buy themselves and buy the president a little more time before declaratively saying anything, one way or the other, with the small exception, Bob, of those top surrogates who've been championing the Biden presidency and campaign from the jump. Chris Coons, from whom you just heard, John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, and a small handful of others.
Scott McFarland, thank you. We appreciate your reporting. It was interesting over the weekend. Senator Bernie Sanders said he's not going to go to that Warner meeting. Too conservative, he said of Senator Warner's. Always tensions in politics. Meanwhile, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is throwing its weight behind President Biden. The caucus chair will join us here on America Decides. Stick with us.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
As you know, some House Democrats are calling on President Biden to drop his reelection bid, but many are deciding to stand behind him despite what happened at the debate. That includes members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. The caucus chair and deputy chair released a statement last night saying, quote, "We stand with President Biden, and we look forward to our continued partnership on the road and legislative wins to benefit the American people." CBS News polling shows President Biden currently leads former President Donald Trump by just 2 points among Latino voters. In 2020, his support among those voters was more than double that of Trump's. The chair of this caucus joins us now from Capitol Hill, Democratic Congresswoman Nanette Barragán. Thank you so much for being here. Take us inside the deliberations, Congresswoman, about this decision by your caucus to stand with President Biden.
Well, this was a statement put out by me on behalf of myself as chair and the deputy chair, rather, Espiad. And it was a statement of the two of us, of our standing with the president and the vice president. There's been a long partnership with the Biden-Harris administration for the last year and a half to take the Congressional Hispanic Caucus on the road. So this has been an extension of that and making sure that we stated our support of the president and the vice president, continuing to do the work of not just going out and engaging folks where Latino communities are, but it's also to highlight legislative wins that House Democrats have worked very closely with the Biden-Harris administration to achieve. One of those things, of course, is to also talk about things like the executive order the president just did to protect the spouses of U.S. citizens. Last week, also, we were with the First Lady in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We have over 50% Latino population to talk about education and workforce. So this is what it's about. It's about going out, it's engaging people, it's about talking about the issues and making sure people know what this president and this vice president have done and how we have worked to put people over politics.
Do you personally have any concerns about President Biden's health or his ability to beat former President Trump?
I would not support the president if I didn't think he could win. This is the one person who's beat Donald Trump. This is somebody who has a record of passing historic legislation that has a positive impact on the Latino community, whether it was expanding access to health care for veterans in the PACT Act, whether it was infrastructure that was creating lots of jobs, including in the Latino community in the construction field, whether it's STEM, which was we're going to put more money to make sure that there are students and students of color, including Latinos, in the pipeline for STEM to get those jobs. There are so many accomplishments, you almost don't know where to start, but it's about also moving forward. It's implementing those things and things like the IRA to combat climate change, but it's also what are we going to do moving forward for Latino communities. And we know we're going to continue to work with the president to try to get things like comprehensive immigration reform done, continue to expand access to health care coverage. Let's not forget what is at stake here.
Well, in
the
terms
former
of
president.
Well, that's right. Let's dig into that. Former President Trump has called for sweeping mass deportations should he win the White House again. Do you believe the Latino community inside Congress, but also outside of Congress, is fully aware of Trump's policy position and proposal?
Well, that's exactly what I was about to say. In my district and throughout the country, when you talk to folks and you bring up Project 2025, sometimes you get a blank stare. They really don't know yet about what's in it. And so when you talk to people about not only what the president has done, but what is at stake and that former President Trump wants to do mass deportations and that innocent people are going to get swept up. The former president himself has said this, that is something that resonates with folks and saying, wait a minute, what? And there is great concern about another Trump presidency, which is why we've got to go out and we've got to make sure people understand what's at stake. It's not just that, it's women's reproductive rights. Just take a look at Nevada, where 81% of Latino voters there believe a woman should have the right to make decisions about their own body. These are decisions these are issues we have to go and talk about to continue that engagement. And I think when voters continue to hear about what has been done, what is at stake, and what they're going to continue to do in another 4 years, that we're going to be able to move this across the finish line, just like he did 4 years ago.
Congresswoman Barragan, we appreciate your time. It seems your caucus is standing by President Biden. It's been a week of a lot of consternation on Capitol Hill, but I'm sure the White House appreciates your position. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And President Biden heads into that NATO summit, focusing on Ukraine and other issues. And as he continues to do, focus on his own battle to keep the Democrats together. Our political panel coming up is right here, standing by, ready to take a close look at everything that's happening in American politics. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS. The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. The NATO summit has kicked off, where dozens of world leaders are now in Washington for that event. Here to discuss what's going on in American politics, not necessarily at NATO, Dave Weigel and Tom Lobianco. Dave is a politics reporter for Semaphore. Tom is the co-founder and national political reporter for 24/7 News. Great to have you both here. Hey. A lot of eyes tonight on Florida.
That's right. You've got one Trump rally, one of a couple coming up, in a place very near to where Marco Rubio and his family live. It is unclear when he's going to pick a running mate. He's been in the catbird seat for 11 days now because longer than that. The focus has not been on Donald Trump. He will eventually get whatever news cycle he wants when he picks a running mate. But in the meantime, he's doing what Donald Trump does very well and stringing people along and driving attention and eyeballs to. I think I've covered umpteen Trump rallies where there was going to be news at it and we had to wait 3 hours for it to happen. So that's my only prediction tonight is that we're going to get some of that.
Is Rubio still in the mix, Tom?
Yeah. Okay, right. Rubio, J.D. Vance, Doug Burgum, as we were just talking about, North Dakota governor. It seems to be those three. Now, it's Trump who we're talking about. There could be a wild card out there. Probably not Kristi Noem. Probably not Tim Scott either. But what's so fascinating about this, as opposed to 8 years ago, the last time he picked a running mate, is the steadiness of this process, the methodicalness of all of it. I mean, last time was pure chaos.
And I mean, last time I remember covering it with you guys, and Trump was thinking about Governor Chris Christie, the former governor at the time of New Jersey. He was thinking about Newt Gingrich. And then ultimately Mike Pence. You wrote the book, literally, Tom.
Yeah.
Piety and Power on Mike Pence. Is Trump looking for another Pence?
No.
Not maybe Pence specifically, but someone in that mold.
Well, when he picked Pence in 2016, it was a different electoral dynamic. He needed to bring back Midwest evangelicals, a lot of reticent conservatives, a lot of Ted Cruz supporters back then. I'm not sure that is the same case here. He's not in as precarious, at this moment, he's not in as precarious an electoral
But he does
problem.
need traditional Republicans to come along. So why isn't Nikki Haley on the list?
I don't think she's that interested in it.
They're all interested in it, Dave.
Would they turn down the chance to be a one-term lame duck president's running mate? Probably not. But she has not made the moves that you would need to do to pander to Donald Trump successfully since she dropped out of the race. She released her delegates. She's not attending the convention. It's also, it hasn't been clear that she brings that many people along. She was a protest vote for a lot of people throughout the primary and after the primary. But the idea that she was going to appeal to a demographic that didn't like Trump as a Trump running mate, that didn't show up in polling.
So if you're in the Trump campaign and you're trying to reach the Nikki Haley voter but not put Nikki Haley on the ticket, who do you pick? Is it Doug Burgum, who is kind of North Dakota traditional conservative business guy? Is it Senator Tim Scott, who has that echo of Reagan's rhetoric and a lot of his own ideology?
Well, what is very different from 2016 is that Burgum, I guess more than the other candidates we're talking about, brings you stability, and Donald Trump right now, please feel free to be angry at me online if I'm saying this, is the candidate of stability. It is very clear that what Donald Trump is running on.
I think you mean in terms of political.
In terms of political stability,
he has control of the party.
He has control of the party.
His true socialist.
He has a record.
Shall we say it's scattered?
Yes, he has a record that he run on. Is he on message every day?
And he's talking about military tribunals of Liz Cheney.
But there was uncertainty about how he would govern in 2016. In 2020, he was running after a very chaotic handling of COVID. I'm kind of underselling it. And this time, he is running against a party that is unsettled. You have 7 Democrats today saying they want Biden off the ticket. Whoever his running mate is would be, if this is the Biden-Harris ticket again, would be in a debate possibly with Kamala Harris after a month of being undermined by her own party and people going on the record saying we wish we could run somebody else for president, not her. So he just has, this is the best situation he's ever had to pick a running mate in and the best narrative he's ever had.
You know, I mean, the thing that I always hear from Trump sources for years now, I mean, this is one of the longest vice presidential selection processes that we've ever witnessed, at least in modern times, is that it's so emotional with Trump. You know, rightly or wrongly, it's a single vote that matters here. It's Trump. And, you know, his people always say that he felt stung by Pence on January 6th. And that reason is why you used to hear a lot about people like Ben Carson, somebody supremely diminutive in this process, incredibly non-threatening. I think that's also why Burgum is still around. I mean, you look at, you know, as Dave was saying here, you know, you look at these tryouts, the stagecraft, Doral, Rubio, or you bring out Melania. But behind the scenes, Burgum has been showing up with his wife at Mar-a-Lago, doing that personal work.
Trump likes him. I hear Trump likes him. There's something about Burgum being a business person, someone who had a software company, sold to Microsoft. Let's turn to the Democrats, though, while we still have you two top guys here. Every single hour, there's another story about another House Democrat who most Americans may not even know. I just keep thinking about President Biden. We covered his campaign in 2020. We covered it probably back in 2008 to a point. He is someone who runs for the Senate in 72. He's up and down. He runs in 1988, 87. He really struggles with the scandal over plagiarism, comes back. Judiciary Committee, Foreign Relations Committee. This guy doesn't quit American politics. And he has always had a chip on his shoulder about how the press has treated him, how they've perceived him. It's not LBJ in the Kennedy level. I mean, the Kennedy people famously scorned LBJ. There's always a sense among Biden sources that the Obama coalition inside the White House didn't appreciate Biden's political skills. So where does this really stand? Is this president at 81 years old digging in and here to stay? Or do you really believe there's enough political capital in the party, if someone ever wanted to use it, to push him out?
There's not political capital outside of the Biden family, the Biden inner circle. That's been cleared in the last few days. And speaking of the past, what the Obama administration, how they handled him, how Obama handled him, he remembers 9 years ago being talked out of running for president. Now, he was trailing in the polls. If he'd run against Hillary Clinton, the argument was that he couldn't beat her in the primary. But he remembers not just not running for president, but everyone after the fact saying, gosh, Joe, we wish we'd run you against Donald Trump. We would have won the election. And it's hard to unlearn that. And other Democrats pointing out that no man steps in the same river twice. He is not the Joe Biden who beat Donald Trump in 2020. It has not penetrated because he is Joe Biden. He knows what he was like. And he has processed, I take him at his word, he's processed that he had a bad night not a night typical or a performance typical what he can do. It hasn't mattered that in the Dayson's debate, he hasn't shown Democrats the sort of live action Joe Biden that convinced them he was credible in 2020.
He went down the trail in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Philadelphia.
He could read off a speech off a teleprompter, but we heard Democrats saying after the debate, we'd like to see him mix it up with voters. We'd like to see him take questions, do an interview.
The Stephanopoulos interview hasn't reassured?
It's reassured Democrats, but it's not what they asked for. They asked for something a lot more heated to prove that he could show up and be credible against Donald Trump for 90 minutes, and he hasn't done that. But a lot of them have realized this is the Joe Biden who has been told to quit, didn't, and won, and it is hard to unlearn that.
And I just wonder, who is the Democrat, if any, who, if they ever stood up and said, enough, Joe, it's over, could get this president to step away? Congresswoman Cheryl has her allies in Congress, but I don't think the White House is worried tonight about her statement with respect to her. But even if Congressman Clyburn, I've wondered about Clyburn.
Yeah.
If Clyburn came out, he said today he's with President Biden 100%. We're riding with Biden, he said. But even if Clyburn spoke out, does the president really move away and say that's it? I don't know.
I mean, the way he handled it, and it's so baked into him. I keep on thinking about the seminal tome in campaign politics. What's the central thesis of what it takes? Richard Ben Kramer is, don't stop, keep running.
And that book details Biden had an aneurysm.
Yes.
In the 88 campaign.
Yes.
And he's battled health things his entire last 30, 40 years.
And I think about the young Biden that jumped into the ash heap in Scranton on a dare. You really saw in so much of this in the Stephanopoulos interview. Stephanopoulos did such a great job pressing him repeatedly and calmly, which is what we do. Very good job. And not getting the answer. And Biden, you start to see more of this defiance coming out, that broadside. At the start of the week, Congress comes back and he says, I'm not leaving, not leaving. And all of that points to it's him. I'm not sure that anybody pushes him out at this point.
Real quick, we're going to stay with us, guys. We're going to take a quick break. Our panel will be with us on the other side.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. Our panel is back with us, Dave Weigel and Tom LoBianco. We have about a minute and a half here, gentlemen. Vice President Harris, Dave, we'll begin with you, then go to Tom. We've been talking a lot about former Vice President Pence, the VP pick for the Republicans. Vice President Harris, what's your assessment as a reporter about how she's handled this moment?
She has tied herself to Joe Biden, appeared more with him in public, defended him in public. She's won some respect from Democrats for how she's talked about Joe Biden. Essence Fest over the weekend in New Orleans, she didn't get a question about Biden. She had a very friendly interview, but she pivoted to Project 2025. She's sort of been leading on the message Democrats want. But as I was saying before, I don't know how this process is going to wind up exactly, but she will have either 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks of being undermined by her party going into a contest with a new Republican vice presidential candidate, with a lot of people saying, look, there was a test of whether you could replace Joe Biden and your party didn't think you could. That is really problematic for her.
Tom?
You know, so much of this is about new leadership for the party. And, you know, what I hear from a lot of, especially a lot of Hoosier Democrats, is they really want new faces. And you don't have that bench. I mean, by not having this a serious primary, I mean, Marianne Williamson, yes, and Dean Phillips, yes. But you didn't have what you had in 2020, which, granted, was stunted. You didn't have people being tested. And people want to see more of Kamala out there. They want to see if, okay, do you pair Tim Ryan with her? Do you put Roy Cooper with her? Does that create a new generation? Do you put Pete Buttigieg atop the DNC? This is something I've heard floated, granted not recently. I mean, that kind of died down over the last 2 days. But a common sentiment I keep hearing is they want fresh blood. They want something new. And maybe the window is passed for that right now.
It's an intriguing moment for both parties. We're going to keep an eye on the vice presidential pick for the Republicans and, of course, what the Democrats are up to. We just have about a few more seconds here. Actually, you know what? Just stay with us. Let's take you live right now to President Joe Biden. Thanks to our panel for being here. We really appreciate it. President Biden is speaking at NATO's 75th anniversary summit.
Countries, including President Truman, came together in this very room. History was watching. It had been 4 years since the surrender of the Axis powers and the end of the most devastating war the world had ever known. Here, these 12 leaders gathered to make a sacred pledge to defend each other against aggression, provide their collective security, and to answer threats as one, because they knew to prevent future wars, to protect democracies, to lay the groundwork for lasting peace and prosperity, they needed a new approach. They needed to combine their strengths. They needed an alliance. And here they signed the Washington Treaty and created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the single greatest, most effective defensive alliance in the history of the world. Mr. Secretary General, leaders of NATO countries, foreign and defense ministers, representatives from partner nations and the European Union, and members of Congress, distinguished guests, welcome to the 2024 NATO Summit. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to host you in this milestone year, to look back with pride at all we've achieved and look ahead to our shared future with strength and with resolve. Together, we rebuilt Europe from the ruins of war, held high the torch of liberty during long decades of the Cold War. When former adversaries became fellow democracies, we welcomed them into the alliance. When war broke out in the Balkans, we intervened to restore peace and stop ethnic cleansing. And when the United States was attacked on September 11th, our NATO allies, all of you, stood with us invoking Article 5 for the first time in NATO history, treating an attack on us as an attack on all of us. A breathtaking display of friendship that the American people will never, ever, ever forget. Through all this history, when great changes occurred, people would ask, can NATO adapt? And every time we proved we could adapt, and we did, evolving our strategies to stay ahead of threats, reaching out to new partners to increase our effectiveness. And here with us today are countries from the Indo-Pacific region. They're here because they have a stake in our success, and we have a stake in theirs. Today, NATO is more powerful than ever, 32 nations strong. For years, Finland and Sweden were among our closest partners. Now they have chosen to officially join NATO, and because of the power and meaning of Article 5 guarantee, that's the reason. It was the most important aspect of the alliance in 1949, and it is still the most important aspect. I'd also note, Finland and Sweden joined the alliance not just because their leaders sought it, because their citizens called for it in overwhelming numbers. Remember, NATO's character is fundamentally democratic, always has been and always must continue to be. And today, NATO is better resourced than it ever has been. I want to pause on this because it's significant. In the year 2020, the year I was elected president, only 9 NATO allies were spending 2% of their defense GDP on defense. This year, 23 will spend at least 2%. And some will spend more than that. And the remaining countries that have not yet reached that milestone will get there soon. This remarkable progress, proof that our commitment is broad and deep, that we're ready, that we're willing, we're able to deter aggression and defend every inch of NATO territory across every domain: land, air, sea, cyber, and space. My friends, it's good that we're stronger than ever, because this moment in history calls for our collective strength. Autocrats want to overturn global order, which is by and large kept for nearly 80 years and counting. Terrorist groups continue to plot evil schemes to cause mayhem and chaos and suffering. In Europe, Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine continues, and Putin wants nothing less than Ukraine's total subjugation, to end Ukraine's democracy, to destroy Ukraine's culture, and to wipe Ukraine off the map. And we know Putin won't stop at Ukraine. But make no mistake, Ukraine can and will stop Putin. Especially with our full collective support. They have our full support. Even before Russian bombs were falling in Ukraine, the alliance acted. I ordered the U.S. reinforcements at NATO's eastern flank. More troops, more aircraft, more capabilities. And now the United States has more than 100,000 troops on the continent of Europe. NATO moves swiftly as well, not only reinforcing the 4 existing battle groups in the east, but also adding 4 more in Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia, essentially doubling NATO's strength on the eastern flank. Together, we've built a global coalition to stand with Ukraine. Together, we provided significant economic and humanitarian assistance. And together, we've supplied Ukraine with weapons it needs to defend itself: tanks, armored fighting vehicles, air defense systems, long-range missiles, and millions of munitions. The United States and nearly 24 allied partners have signed bilateral security agreements with Ukraine, and more countries will follow. Today, I'm announcing an historic donation of air defense equipment for Ukraine. The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment. for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And in the coming months, the United States and our partners intend to provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems. The United States will make sure that when we export critical air defense interceptors, Ukraine goes to the front of the line. They will get this assistance before anyone else gets it. All told, Ukraine will receive hundreds of additional interceptors over the next year, helping protect Ukrainian cities against Russian missiles, Ukrainian troops facing air attacks on their front lines. Make no mistake, Russia is failing in this war. More than 2 years into Putin's war of choice, his losses are staggering. More than 350,000 Russian troops dead or wounded. Nearly 1 million Russians, many of them young people, have left Russia because they no longer see a future in Russia. And Kyiv, remember, fellas and ladies, supposed to fall in 5 days, remember? Was still standing 2.5 years later and will continue to stand. All of we allies knew that before this war, Putin thought NATO would break. Today, NATO is stronger than it's ever been in its history. When this senseless war began, Ukraine was a free country. Today, it is still a free country. And the war will end with Ukraine remaining a free and independent country. Russia will not prevail. Ukraine will prevail. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a pivotal moment for Europe, for the transatlantic community, and I might add for the world. Let's remember, the fact that NATO remains the bulwark of global security did not happen by accident. It wasn't inevitable. Again and again at critical moments, we chose unity over disunion, progress over retreat, freedom over tyranny, hope over fear. Again and again we stood behind our shared vision of a peaceful and prosperous transatlantic community. Here at this summit, we gather to proclaim NATO is ready and able to secure that vision today and well into the future. Let me say this. An overwhelming bipartisan majority of Americans understand that NATO makes us all safer. The fact that both Democratic and Republican parties are represented here today is a testament to that fact. The American people know that all the progress we've made in the past 75 years has happened behind the shield of NATO. And the American people understand what would happen if there was no NATO. Another war in Europe, American troops fighting and dying, dictators spreading chaos, economic collapse, catastrophes. Americans, they know we're stronger with our friends. And we understand this is a sacred obligation. As President Reagan put it, and I quote, "If our fellow democracies are not secure, we cannot be secure. If you are threatened, we are threatened. If you're not at peace, we cannot be at peace." Reagan knew it then, and we know it now. Our nations will continue to keep faith with what we pledged in years to come. Now, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to end my remarks in a slightly unusual way. NATO is an alliance of nations, but also made up of leaders. And one person in particular has done an extraordinary job leading NATO for the last decade. Secretary General Stoltenberg, would he come forward? So much of the progress we made in the alliance is thanks to the Secretary. He's a man of integrity and intellectual rigor, a calm temperament in a moment of crisis, a consummate diplomat who works with leaders across the political spectrum and always finds a way to keep us moving forward. Secretary, you've guided this alliance through one of the most consequential periods in its history. I realize, I was talking to your wife, I personally ask you to extend your service. Forgive me. And you put your own plans on hold. When the Russia war in Ukraine began, you didn't hesitate. Today, NATO is stronger, smarter, and more energized than when you began. And 1 billion people across Europe and North America, indeed the whole world, will reap the rewards of your labor for years to come in the form of security, opportunity, and greater freedom. For these reasons, I'm pleased to award you the highest civilian honor the United States can bestow, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Ask a military to come forward. I'm asking to read the citation.
The President of the United States of America awards this Presidential Medal of Freedom to Jens Stoltenberg. A visionary statesman and ceaseless defender of democracy, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has guided the NATO alliance through the most consequential decade for European security since World War II. When Vladimir Putin launched his brutal assault on the people of Ukraine, betting that NATO would break, Secretary General Stoltenberg proved him wrong. Under his stewardship, NATO has become stronger and more united than ever, and Americans for generations to come will benefit from the safer world he helped create. He demonstrates that the core truth of the alliance is as powerful now as it was 75 years ago. Together, we are stronger.
This is my wish for the world, that peace would find its way to every boy and girl. This is the time for harmony.
You have been watching President Biden speak to the NATO alliance, which is in Washington. Meeting, and we are now joined by Matthew Kroning. He's the Vice President and Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. Matthew, thank you for joining us. Let's just start with what the goal of this NATO summit was, because they don't have these regularly. This is now, as I understand it, the fifth one since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So what's the goal of this one?
Well, this is an important summit. It's the 75th anniversary